Hello, and welcome back to my series covering the Marathon ARG. Today I'm going to be talking about the information we learned about MIDA, a rebel group of political agitators that were even featured in the original trilogy, and have driven some pretty cool theories and lore analysis for decades. My analysis of MIDA in the ARG will take place over the course of 2 videos. This first video will discuss the significance of MIDA in the context of the information from the original games, and also cover an analysis of the IRL Art Piece Bungie had in place for the ARG. I believe that the art released by MIDA through the ARG is intrinsic to their beliefs, and as they say, a picture tells 1,000 words. So, when I saw the length of this video getting a bit out of hand, I decided to split it into 2 parts, so that a steadier stream of content would be available, with the next part covering the entirety of the zine. Before we get started, I would like to once again thank my sources: the ARG Google Doc, Marathon story page, Carnamir's Lore Archive, and also The Art of Rebellion, Social Justice and Chicano Visual Arts by Jacob Prendez. This paper is Jake's master's thesis, and it covers the influence of Chicano visual art on social justice movements. As someone who does not have an art degree and has spent very little time analyzing art, this paper was crucial in broadening my understanding of how art is utilized to affect political change. The zine and the art alongside it, which was released by MIDA, feels very much like Bungie trying to emulate political rebellion art to create a more authentic universe. I think that they achieved this goal through an authentic representation of the sentiments expressed in real-world rebellious art. I also believe that this is especially evident in the street art piece that Bungie put together, which we will cover shortly. For this reason, I believe Jake's thesis succinctly explains MIDA's utilization of art to attract people to their cause and display their sentiment on the UESC and corporations who influence the quality of life for humans within the universe of Marathon. To conclude my introduction, I would like to quote a portion of Jake's conclusion, where he says, "I believe that art is not innately political, nor inspiring, nor communal. Art is in the hands of its creators. It does what it is created to do. Art can be ornamental, decorative, passive, and apolitical. In the right hands, art can also be a tool, a weapon, a means of social change, and is mightier than the sword." I will also take any chance to promote a fellow Jake, so the link to his shop is included in the description below. Another huge thank you to Linen VC on Polycam for scanning the real-world ARG art piece that was in Venice Beach. A link to his Polycam page is also below. It was truly very helpful. Alright, let's get into this. So, what is MIDA? To begin with, I think we should clarify that MIDA is seemingly an acronym for which we have no clearly communicated meaning. The original trilogy makes no reference to what the term means, and the writers for the ARG play with this concept by introducing numerous possible meanings for the acronym that express the sentiments of the group. MIDA, as an organization, is described in Marathon 1 via the second terminal of the level, the Rose. It reads, MIDA, as it was known, was a popular political party until the failed coup of 2466. This date is altered to match Bungie's corrected timeline. When their popularity suffered during their short rule, MIDA gained control of Mars for only 3 months, but their rule was ruthless and cruel. The MIDA death squads killed anyone who they suspected of being loyal to the UEG. Although accurate census data is not available for that period, it is estimated that about 10% of the population was killed. The MIDA coup was afterwards criticized for its short-sightedness. In an organization that was notorious for its long-ranging policies and politicking, the coup was very short-lived. MIDA never seriously accounted for the UEG's overwhelming superiority in ground forces and warships. In fact, they never attempted to take over the Marathon, which was nearing completion and would have made a very powerful weapon. The Marathon's massive size made it invulnerable to most normal space attacks, and it would have made a very stable weapons platform. After the failed coup, the leaders of MIDA were executed for their crimes, and the political organization was banned in all forms. The organization has survived, though, as an underground terrorist organization, and remains active to this day. In its underground state, it fosters terrorism throughout Seoul, and due to its spectacular funding and excellent personnel, it has grown to be one of the most feared terrorist groups active anywhere in Seoul. This terminal also provides some historical context for why the people of Mars may have felt the desire for rebellion when describing the Mizraya massacre. Although most historians point their fingers at the Mizraya massacre as the cause of the Third Martian War, The coming of a Martian conflict was inevitable. The failure of the Martian economy and a long series of political struggles between Mars and Earth continually strengthened the MIDA radicals. This trend of radicalization accelerated with the building of the Marathon and the subsequent failure of the Christs. Mizraia massacre on January 6, 2345, at the United Earth Government Mizraia Food Distribution Center, what had begun as a commonplace food riot turned into a massacre. The UEG riot troops who arrived at the scene had been informed that the rioters were armed. As UEG troopers approached the scene in their Randall hovertank, plasma fire began spraying upwards. In a flash decision, the commander of the hovertank ordered his crew to open fire upon the crowd. It took only 5 seconds for over 500 starving Martians to be incinerated. In the ensuing investigation of the hovertank vidcams, it was clear that only 3 of the rioters were armed, and that the rest of the crowd was trying to flee the scene. Those 3 became known as the Mizraia 3. They have gone down in history for starting the most destructive and bloody conflict since humanity had left Earth. However, it is clear that these 3 have gained the credit for starting a war that would have happened anyway. It is also speculated that the 10 Mjolnir cyborgs that were secretly placed on board the Marathon prior to its launch were coordinated by MIDA as a potential act of terrorism that was thrown off by the unexpected 4 attack. It is also hinted that Bernard Strauss, the Marathon's first science director, may have associated with MIDA, as he was seemingly the only character who knew of the cyborgs that were on board prior to its launch. Leela even states in the final terminal of the first game that, quote, "I do not believe Durandal himself brought the cyborgs on board, and I have other evidence that a human operator was influencing Durandal up to the time the Marathon was launched." If Bernard is a MIDA operative or sympathizer, it could also indicate that his tampering with Durandal was a direct attempt to disrupt the UESC's Marathon mission. That could mean that the entire 4 debacle and subsequent events of the original trilogy and of the new game could directly be the consequence of MIDA's actions. Although their organization, history, and intent is somewhat obscured, they are clearly a major player in the game and are heavily impacting the events that we see. The important thing to understand is that MIDA is a political group that seemingly originated on Mars in response to the Martians' feelings of inequality in reference to the support and control enacted by the UESC. The failure of the Christ Soul Orbiters, which were meant to provide Mars with resources, but ultimately were ineffectual, combined with the oppression and authoritarian system set in place by the UESC, led to the extremist actions, which we will speak about today. As stated in the first video of this series, when covering the ARG info, I am going to focus on the in-universe lore we obtained as opposed to the mechanisms which controlled the release of information in the game. If you are interested in understanding how everything was figured out and discovered, please refer to my sources in the comments below. Specifically, the ARG document and the Marathon story page ARG section have some incredible documentation that describes how it all went down. So the first piece of information from the ARG that I am going to cover is the street art piece that was found in Los Angeles. MIDA's website, HereOurSilence.com, which would house the zine that contains the majority of the information we'll be covering, also contained coordinates that, when followed, led to a real-world concrete structure in Venice Beach that featured graffiti from MIDA. To begin with, I will start at the top of the structure. The top features 3 separate eyes that are overlooking the rest of the work, clearly evoking the image of the all-seeing eye. This appears to reference the MIDA perspective that the UESC is responsible for a level of authoritarian control via technology that restricts and violates people's innate freedoms. Additionally, the 3 eyes are distinct in ways that indicate a representation of separate types of entities. The strained red eye appears the most human and could represent MIDA or humans who are the victims to the other groups represented. You can also see many eyes surrounding the strained eyes, all looking in separate directions with different expressive accents. This seems to be capturing the feeling of paranoia and distrust that would surely exist within a highly secretive rebel group that is up against the force of a much stronger organization, like a megacorp or interstellar government. Some of these eyes even feature separate colors of the iris. I believe that these colors could coordinate with the UESC, Traxxas, and Sakaguchi. It's difficult to determine which association applies to the colors, but the UESC frequently utilizes this blue color throughout the ARG. The blue eye is also the largest and seems to be the only eye directly looking at one of the other greater eyes. This would align with the UESC being the largest organization and that they are more interested in controlling the corporations and may already be covertly operating within the ranks of MIDA. Two green eyes also appear above and below the primary red eye. The green draws to mind Sakaguchi. The green silkworms with the barcodes that were constructing the synthetic form appear to align with the green coloration of this group. Finally, a singular purple eye appears below the red eye. Given the other associations, we could assume that this eye represents Traxxas, although I wasn't able to find a direct correlation for the color purple. This leads me to believe that MIDA is compromised to some extent, and that they are potentially aware of that. The setup for this new marathon game displays a messy political and commercial environment where the alignment of any group is subject to change at any time given the secretive network of information and how permeable the lines of separation appear to be. Pretty cool how just this small component of this piece is able to capture so much. This will continue throughout the ARG as well. As we continue down the conical structure, we see pieces of barbed wire separating the structure into quarters. Keep this in mind as we go over the associated location of each piece, as I believe this could be depicting the perceived social class that is associated, metaphorically, with what is depicted. The second layer of this side depicts the green silkworms from the trailer, the one that was constructing the body, and also an eye which features apparent circuitry extending away from the orbital socket. We will examine a greater eye which features this same design shortly. This feels to me like the representation of runners who are utilizing the clone technology on Tau Ceti but are aligned with MIDA. This also correlates to the silkworm, as that is seemingly how the clones are fabricated. It would also make sense that Sakaguchi would provide these resources to all of the factions involved, as they are driven by profit. And what better way is there to profit than by finding a customer on both sides of a conflict which you yourself exacerbate? In the third quarter of this side, the design gets more cluttered. The circuitry from the eye above continues downward, and two sayings from the MIDA zine appear. The first is, "We, us, you," an apparent appeal to the people who have suffered at the hands of the UESC and organizations exerting control over the stars and Sol system. That MIDA represents the goals of the common man. The second phrase is comfort cage, once again reinforcing the sense of oppression from the confines of the authoritarian government. Surely the advanced technology of the late second millennium is alluring to citizens of the time period, who may choose life in the hands of an all-controlling government, exchanging freedoms for comfort. Laying across the barbed wire separating the third and final quarter of the cone is a lion with X's over its eyes. Now, throughout the ARG, we will see references to anthropomorphized entities in place of organizations within the universe. I will get into speculation as to who the lion could represent later when we get to that section of the zine. The final quarter of this side features the UESC acronym written out 5 times and crossed out. In between the third and fourth instance are a pair of blue eyes. The eyes appear to be staring at the black silhouettes that surround the bottom of the conical portion of the structure. The silhouettes have 2 variations. One has a square-shaped head, and the others have a more realistically rendered shape. These variants could be separating clone or AIs from regular humans, but I believe the 2 groups are more likely representing those that obey the UESC and those who have escaped the proverbial comfort cage and realize the oppression they have suffered at the hands of their government. If the blue eyes are associated with the UESC, then the placement in the lowest quarter of the structure, alongside the masses of people, seems to imply that they have wormed their way into everyday society, and people as well. That sympathizers for the UESC exist in the common man, and that they may even be being manipulated by operatives within their social class. This could be true, or a dramatization employed by the paranoid MIDA to increase sympathy for their cause, as suspicions of that level of invasion of privacy could turn those who are on the fence about supporting MIDA's actions. The leftmost aspect of this side also features a rocket ship with the phrase, "Free your minds," written alongside it. The path to freedom is to escape the sphere of influence of the UESC. We will see this at the end of the MIDA zine, but ultimately they seemingly want to restore power to the people to determine their own societal structure. This has been stripped via the proliferation of technology in numerous ways, and this ship symbolizes the pathway to their freedom. The right side of this section features one of my favorite recurring phrases that MIDA has: artificial unintelligence. I am sure we can all relate to that after the onslaught of AI art and shorts that start with this.
Did you know short people could not be arrested in ancient...
It's time to stop!
But I am also sure that the sentiment would carry much more weight in a society where AI rampancy exists. It appears to be common knowledge that the AI Traxxas 4 went rampant and damaged a planetary-sized net on Mars. The memo from the UESC leaks that we discussed in Part 1 also made direct comments about the likelihood of a rampancy event, and how that could be related to the loss of communication with the Marathon and the colony. This implies to me that the common understanding of AI allows for a communal comprehension of the risks associated with the implementation of that kind of artificial intelligence. We are also really only shown AI as a tool for the government or major corporations to reach their goals. We have never been shown an AI that was created or implemented to promote social health, or could be controlled or directed by the masses. Effectively, in the Marathon universe, AI is essentially a superweapon owned by the elites. I feel that this disparity may be a core component to the fundamental beliefs that MIDA appear to hold. The next side of the conical component we'll look at feels to me like the most straightforward component of the piece. I'll refer to this as the AI side, as I believe that the computerized eye on this side represents the AI that we will encounter at the colony. There are a total of 8 eyes on this side, one for each of the colony's AIs that were referenced in Bernard Strauss's AI Rampancy memo. Now, I believe that each eye has some clues as to which AI they will represent, and could offer some hints as to the types of character traits each AI will have. I'm not going to go in depth here, but I did talk about this a little bit deeper in the first video in this series, when going over the AI Rampancy memo there. With that said, I think that it's important to talk about a few of them. The top seems to be the AI JO. This would align with Bungie having primary AIs in their game, with references to ancient mythological or historical weapons. I've seen it said, which I can't find a source for right now, sorry, that this AI's name may be Joyeuse. Joyeuse was, in medieval legend, the sword wielded by Charlemagne as his personal weapon. A sword identified as Joyeuse was used in French royal coronation ceremonies since the 13th century, and is now kept at the Louvre. Could this be the metaphorical sister to Durandal? This is the AI listed as the Colony AI on the memo, and given its sinister appearance and position above all the others, I believe it will be much stronger and potentially the primary antagonist force in the game. Another one that we may be able to identify is the eye which has a tear under it. I believe that this could represent the AI GA. This AI was described as compassionate, empathetic, and transparent. The tear stands out as an emotional sentiment attached to this AI. Also of note is that all but one of the AIs exists within the upper half of the barbed wire sections, while the singular one that appears in the third section is pictured with an absurdist, swirling eye that I think indicates that this AI has become disturbed or crazy. Now, when reviewing the colony AI to determine which one is represented by this, it becomes a little more difficult, because with rampancy, we could see some disturbing or insane aspects of their personality. My best guess is that it could represent NA, as they are described as needing, quote, to be reminded from time to time about their primary function. If the science and engineering crew are gone for years, this would lead me to believe that NA could get confused as to what it is or what its functions are. This could lead to some hilarious stuff, as an AI without a leash, completely disoriented for years, could cause some serious damage at the colony. It would be fun to have a location that is centered on whatever absurd task it has been conducting for all that time. What if it started utilizing robotic equipment to build ridiculous structures without purpose? Or what if it has access to some sort of weather control system that it constantly alternates under the premise that it is controlling time, and now it isn't even aware of how much time has passed since the colony fell? A fun twist could be that this is actually JO, and that once the colony fell, another AI forcefully took over control and exiled JO. Maybe the goal even could be to expel that other AI and in place JO to return her to her fullest abilities. Just a thought, but I feel like we will be able to look back at this image of the AI eyes after more information is unveiled and see a lot of information that was right in front of our eyes the whole time. A few more MIDA sayings, rockets, and masses of people also feature on this side, but I believe we've covered the relevant information here, and the phrases are pretty straightforward. The third and final side of the cone component features what I believe is a clone or runner eye. It has more human features, but also features the circuitry-esque lines trailing outward from the pupil, indicating the combined features of these synthetic bodies that house consciousness. These circuits extend downward to a second barbed wire quarter, which features 3 separate images: a runner, a moon, and a mushroom. The runner features an armband, which appears to be labeled R-XBS. I'm not convinced yet that we have an identity beyond that for this runner yet, but the acknowledgement or memorialization here may mean that they are a key MIDA member making runs on Tau Ceti. MIDA appears to be so secretive that they aren't really named beyond code names. For reference, the authors for the pages of the zine are listed and refer to individuals on the writing team at Bungie, but I don't currently see any connection to those names here either. The moon seems to be an apparent reference to Deimos, the Martian moon which was hollowed out to construct the marathon. The mushrooms are intriguing though. I'd referenced in my analysis of the trailer that there were some curious components of the mushroom that made it unique. The connection between the green spores and the green synthetic silkworms had led me to believe that there is a possible deeper connection to the plot of the new game, that potentially the mushrooms are a consequence of the runner's presence as opposed to the natural fungi of Tau Ceti 4. This inclusion here with the runner, I feel, lends some credence to this concept. And what sits alongside this? Deimos, a natural entity which has undergone an unnatural process at the hands of humanity. I could be onto something here, or completely off, but I believe the recurrence of the mushroom imagery could indicate some level of importance. The third quarter of this side features the marathon logo, but reformatted to represent the symbolic bleeding hole left by the removal of Deimos from the Martian gravitational field. Written around the image is Free Mars, and the bleeding hole is labeled the Lost Child. Hidden behind the barbed wire near to this image is a representation of the other Martian moon, Phobos. Although slightly obscured, I believe this is labeled Only Child, referring of course to the loss of its proverbial twin at the hands of the UESC. This image beautifully outlines MIDA's harsh criticism of the UESC's actions on Mars, and although we don't have a clear origin for MIDA, I could imagine that this image could be the thesis statement of sorts for most of their actions after the announcement of the Marathon project, when Deimos was purchased. The location of this image in the lower half of this section could indicate the impact that this event had on the people, and their literal proximity as the moon is right above their heads. Additionally, this section includes some MIDA logos and rockets that I can't see a relevance for beyond what we discussed earlier. Perhaps, in totality, the numerous rockets coming from all sides could express the chaotic race to Tau Ceti that we see play out between the groups in the ARG. The final quarter contains the mass of people we have talked about earlier, along with a crowd of stick figures, with some painted in red. Just below that, we see the MIDA logo, but with a blue and green color scheme. The combination of these two images hints at the existence of MIDA within every organization, that sympathizers for the MIDA cause may be housed in these positions, creating a web of influence throughout the main players that is only revealed through coded language and imagery, so as to maintain the secrecy of the organization. The remaining component of this piece is the three-pronged base at the bottom of the structure, which holds up the conical aspect. This area features many of the anthropomorphized faces, MIDA phrases, and artistic stylings that we will see within the ARG. I believe that much of this is relevant in capturing some of the nuances in the belief system held by MIDA, but is also clearly outlined in the zine. For this reason, I am only going to point out a few things here that I personally found interesting. The first thing is the fan favorite return of the term BOB. BOB is an acronym for Born on Board, indicating those on board the Marathon who were born during the 300-year journey from Mars to Tau Ceti. The original trilogy has a lot of fun with basically making these bobs the comedic relief, and many of the texts and level titles even that reference them play with the idea that they are disposable and largely a nuisance. The in-universe sentiment that I get is that they are a perceived lower class, as they have no home planet and were of a familial line that was not of a high enough value to be placed into stasis during the journey for utilization at the colony. My understanding is that this term originates from the colonists or AI on board the Marathon, so it is interesting to note that MIDA is even familiar with the term. Now, the end of Marathon 2 sees a portion of Bob's escaping Durandal's grasp in a stolen 4 ship, assumedly heading for home with the upgraded ship capabilities afforded to them by the alien tech. So it could be historically accurate that this term was known by the larger Sol system upon their return, or MIDA may have extracted this intel through less than legal means from the UESC, who may have had enough communication with the Marathon to learn of this term over their journey. Or maybe the elements sympathetic to MIDA on board the Marathon could have had communication with MIDA HQ far longer than we were previously aware of. Regardless, it is fun to see the classic term return, and I'm looking forward to how they play with the concept in the upcoming game. The next piece I want to look at on the base are the 2 skeletal fish. The appearance of these shapes at the bottom of the structure imitate the conceptual location of fossils. This could be a reference to a separate anthropomorphized entity that represents a character or group that we have some previous knowledge, i.e. Strauss was a fish out of water on his journey because of his shifting allegiance in combination with his forced interaction with the Four. But another spin is that this fossil concept may imply that the colony has some type of life prior to the presence of humanity or the Four. An Easter egg on the level Never Burn Money from the first Marathon reveals a phrase written on the map screen. The Yarrow were at Tau Ceti. The Yarrow are ancient aliens behind much of the technology featured in Infinity that plays a pivotal role in the narrative. They were hyper-intelligent and able to conduct a litany of advanced space operations that I will not get into here. But a recurring theme throughout Marathon is the idea that much of the technology, to include the tech utilized to create the Mjolnir cyborgs, is a successor to the hidden discovery of Yarrow technology throughout history. These fossils could indicate that below the surface of the colony lies the metaphorical fossils of whatever race of aliens existed on Tau Ceti prior to humanity and the Four's arrival. Could this be an additional top-secret component in the race to get to Tau Ceti? Perhaps somebody is aware of something more valuable there than a colony that has been destroyed or abandoned. To conclude this section, I will add that after the MIDA website, hearoursilence.com, was taken down by the UESC, the structure was covered in a blue screen and UESC markings to hide the illegal protest art from the terrorist group. I loved seeing this, and I am super impressed with the work Bungie put into it. Thank you to Bungie and everyone who documented this, especially Lynn MVC, who scanned the structure and uploaded it. And if anyone knows what this style of concrete structure is called, or if it is something Bungie brought in or is always at Venice Beach, please let me know. So this is where I'm going to conclude this part of my coverage of MIDA within the ARG. The next video is going to cover the 37-page zine that MIDA released and has a lot of very specific information from their writings. I hope that you guys are looking forward to it, and I hope that this video was of some value to deepening your understanding of MIDA and their place within the universe. I am truly appreciative of all of the comments, subscriptions, and likes that I have been receiving, and I cannot wait to put the next part of this series out. If you enjoyed the video, please consider leaving a like or a comment down below, and if you know of anybody who you think would be interested in this, or a community or group of people that you associate with who would enjoy it, feel free to share. I would love to increase the number of people who are interested in Marathon. Well guys, thanks for everything. Bye.